Hello and welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. We're your hosts. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Sean.
And we're glad you're here. For the next 15 minutes, we'll talk about a sales issue, big and small, for salespeople, sales leaders, and selling situations. We're glad you're here, and let's get started. Welcome back. Good to hear you all out in podcast land. That didn't really make sense. Hear you all. I think it's more important for me to say, good to be back with you all out there in podcast land. Today, after that really bad intro, we're going to talk about two key topics for meetings. Sean, I'm excited, even though I fumbled the ball right out of the gate here, to talk about why it's so important to have a plan for your meeting and a couple of key topics that every salesperson and sales leader should have pre-planned as a part of the meeting setup.
And once again, just like last week, we're talking about meetings that are going to be on a weekly or maybe every other week kind of agenda. We're not specifically talking about meetings that are quarterly or kickoff meetings or something like that, or one-on-one meetings. These are meetings that literally we are trying to have a conversation with our team, get a catch up, get everybody working on the same page, and then let them go out there and hunt bear for a while. I think that the big thing that we need to talk about is what are those two key topics. Now, I'm big, and I kind of said this last week. Let's start out with the same agenda all the time. That's not really a topic. That's more of a let everybody talk about what's going on in their life. But then maybe there's something big that happened in your company. We want to control how many of those there are. If there are 15 different groups in our companies that want to talk to the sales team, you don't invite 15 people to have 3 minutes of conversation in a 1-hour meeting. That just doesn't work. And I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I think everybody out there gets it. We want to select 1 or 2 people that actually need to have a conversation with our team, and they can't get this across in their own video recording if they have to, maybe their own email out to everybody that explains everything, their own PowerPoint, whatever that case may be. But the key thing here is we are going to have a conversation about this. So limit it to 1 or 2 key topics that you're going to really dig into. Less is more. Digging in is better than being just at the surface on these topics.
So when you're planning these meetings, the first decision I like to make is, am I going to drive content by using external resources? Meaning, am I going to invite someone into this group meeting for a snippet of training, a features update, something external to what a typical sales meeting might be? Or are we going to keep it internally focused? Meaning, are we going to focus on a deal, a win, a best practice, something that we can control the agenda and control the content flow as an internal sales issue? Again, it's got to be key and high priority. We don't want to just talk about or rail against the new software feature that someone's making us use. We're not talking about trying to make this an airing of grievances. We want to stay focused on things we can impact and influence outcomes on.
I totally agree. In fact, you kind of brought this up, but I'm going to dig into this just a little bit. If you're complaining about how much time that you have to spend updating the CRM system to update your opportunities, that is not a topic for a meeting unless you are teaching them best practices on how to use the CRM system so it doesn't take so long. But if it's them complaining about it, them being the sales team, complaining about it, that's a one-on-one discussion. You get complaints like that one-on-one. You work with that person that's having the problem one-on-one. You don't take your entire team and let it roll into this quote-unquote bitch fest where all we're doing is complaining. We don't want that in our meetings. We want things to be positive and proactive. And it's perfectly fine to say the topic for this meeting is the new update that just happened to Pipedrive, because we just got a new update to that. And let's surmise that we're using a really good CRM tool like Pipedrive. here's this new feature that's in Pipedrive. Let's make sure everybody's comfortable with that. That is a great single topic for a meeting, and it's a topic that we should consider for our meetings. But maybe it's, a new feature in our product that just came out. Maybe it's something that's wrong. Maybe there's an issue with a maintenance issue or a warranty issue that we need to make sure the salespeople are all talking the same way. But once again, these are one or two topics, not 10 topics that we're going to try to do at a high level and bounce between, because then nobody gets any value out of that.
Completely agree. So let's dig into mapping content. Our friends on the other side of the cubicle that are working in marketing have a content plan for the year, probably. We, as salespeople and sales leaders, should have content plans for our meeting. One best practice would be to make sure we're touching on the big parts of our roles as sales leaders. Are we coaching and developing skills? Are we confirming KPIs? Are we teaching how to set meeting goals or deliver on our capabilities, presentations, or demonstrations? Are we teaching on the key parts of our sales process? And then also, are we touching on upskilling? So when we're thinking about content and big buckets of thought, where are we focusing the meeting time and the meeting content? If we're not touching on all the major areas, now would be a good time in the year to out and say, what areas have I not touched on in a long time? Best practices with data capture, best practices with closing behaviors, practices with pipeline fill. These are all relevant and pertinent types of content discussions that you can apply to your meetings. And if you find you're doing this, if you're always talking about pipeline generation, that can get kind of stale. Think about your audience as listeners and what they want to hear versus what they need to hear. You got to walk that fine line of both.
Great point. There's a couple of things you said there that I just want to re-emphasize. First of all, don't have every one of your meetings be about you guys aren't closing enough deals. Do that one-on-one if you have to, but don't make that be the thing about every meeting, because that's going to make a meeting that nobody wants to go to, and they're going to turn off before they even start. So you have a 1 o'clock start time on your meeting, they are mentally checked out at 12:55. If they know that every time they're just going to get beat up, then they're just not, they're going to be there because you make them, but they're not going to learn anything. Instead, I love the idea of a content calendar for salespeople. And I sure hope the marketing guys are listening to this right now as well, that they need a content calendar. But your sales team needs a content calendar as well. And let's work on their skills. And maybe that one or two topics, maybe one of those is, how are we going to introduce this product? How are we going to work on this particular problem? How are we going to talk about this industry that we're going after and what's going on in that industry? What are you trying to do as a sales leader? You are trying to motivate your sales team to go out there and hunt bear. It's hard to hunt bear. It really is. It's hard to go out there. You get beat up, you get said no to. Salespeople have a rough life. But if you have an appropriate compensation plan, they know that the more they do it, the better they get paid. So let's give them the tools to get paid better. Let's give them the tools to hunt more bear faster, hunt bigger bear, hunt whales instead of dolphins. I don't know. Whatever parallelism you want to use there. But let's make sure they're going after the deals that actually influence their income, and what tools are you giving them to make that happen?
I love that. I love the surf and turf referencing there as well, from bears to whales. That's always good. But you hit on some really, really pertinent things there. And the way I like to make that stick with the team is, number one, by leading the content, modeling the behaviors for the meetings and the structure and infrastructure. But every so often, I like to have somebody other than me internally lead the meeting to present their best practices. Yeah, we do these things called one-to-ones separate from this type of meeting. And in these one-to-ones, for those who've never been in a sales leadership role, in these one-to-ones, we're drawing out the successes and challenges of individual salespeople, catching them doing things right in front of their peers. So bringing those one-to-one experiences back to this meeting and having them share, that's a key piece of content that you as a sales leader or somebody who's not been traditionally in a sales leadership role can add to a meeting to add high amounts of value quickly to a sales meeting. Sean, I'm thinking here there, and we hadn't really mapped this out entirely, but when we're thinking about content, how often do you think about building your replacement, building the next wave of the sales leadership pipeline?
Great question. So obviously, in my role and in your role, we know we are going to leave because we are fractional VPs of sales. Our job is to come into a company, make them better, and then shake their hands and say, "Don't break it because it's all working now." That's a key thing is that don't break it, right? So in order for them not to get broken after we leave, we have to make sure that there are people in place after we're gone that are going to lead these meetings. So there's a couple of things there. First of all, they have to want to do it. In other words, they have to see value of going through the meetings that we were leading so that they're like, I'm going to do it like Kevin did it. I'm going to do it like Sean did it because that worked for me personally and that seemed to jive with the team. So I think that's a really good thought process of how do we stop that process from going backwards and going into a bad meeting or no meetings or whatever the case might be, whatever happened before we were there. So I think about all the time, really bad grammar there, sorry about that. I always think about how to get somebody else to be a leader within the group, even if it's a put them on the a stage for a little bit because they have some really good experiences. They have some really bad experiences that they can share with their fellow salespeople, and we can learn from each other in those cases. So I'm a big believer in elevating people and making them be leaders within the group.
Completely agree. Grooming future leaders is a core behavior of a good or great sales leader. Completely agree. So let's talk about how we're capturing those learning moments for all sales meetings. There's a market discussion now about AI and things. So I would put forward to all the listeners here that regardless of what tool you use to capture the to do items, the list items, regardless of the tool you use, make sure you're using one consistently. Whether it's AI or it's manual, the boilerplate of this is if you're using Excel this week and Microsoft Word or OneNote next week, please just choose one. It'll make everybody's life easier.
I agree. I agree 100%. Don't be bouncing among new tools too often. There's got to be a little bit of a thought process on is this tool really going to make it a better meeting? If not, let's not make a change. Now, I love technology. I came from a technology background, Kevin, so did you. So I am always looking for ways to improve my life. But don't experiment in the meeting. Experiment with those off the meeting, outside of the meeting. Experiment with those new tools, those new technologies that are out there that might make your life a little bit better. And then once you truly understand how to use it, then bring it into your meeting. I know that I've been playing around with artificial intelligence technology that will transcribe the meeting and get it all working, get it all right, and be pretty close proximity to what everybody said, identify the different speakers. There's technology out there that does that, and that's a good thing. But until you're ready for it, until you've practiced it outside of the meeting, don't practice with it inside the meeting. Your meeting is more important than that. It has to be a training time, it has to be an encouragement time, it has to be a recognition time. It's not about playing with new technology.
I could not have said that any better. So, from the moment we opened up the discussion, we talked about having two key topics for this discussion. And my takeaway from that is one, be prepared, have a content plan for the entire year. And two is don't experiment in the meeting. Those are probably my two largest takeaways from this discussion. As a participant and as a listener. So thank you for calling those out, Sean.
No problem. And I would actually add a third one, and then I'll wrap up. And that third one is try to get somebody else to talk. Try to make somebody else a hero in the meeting. Give a little bit of pat on back on somebody else that's out there. But it's 15 minutes, and we're trying to get these done on time. We hope that everybody comes back and has this conversation with us. At least they're talking to their radio as they drive down the road, and they're yelling at us. But that's okay, too. Thank you very much for joining us on this podcast of Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. We hope that we were able to share some valuable insight, valuable knowledge with you to make your selling adventures easier and more successful. Please join us every week. We drop these on Tuesday afternoon at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Please subscribe to us in your favorite podcast player. Also, please join us on LinkedIn, where we do a CEO workshop, and that CEO workshop is dedicated monthly to big questions that CEOs are having and how to grow their business and drive sales. You can find us on LinkedIn. Just search for Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Thank you very much. Have a great day.